Okay, welcome to this podcast today. So I'm very fortunate to have Brianna with me, and we're going to go through a conversation about some of the things and challenges, I guess, that have happened to Brianna as part of her kind of spiritual path, spiritual journey. I connected initially with Brianna on Podmatch, read her, well, I read your, obviously you, I read your profile, thought, wow, what interesting life. Could see you'd had an NDE, near-death experience, which is always an interesting conversation anyway, really. And then notice that you're QHHT hypnosis, which obviously is the area that we kind of sit into, where we kind of work with hypnosis type practitioners. So really, your kind of profile was a really good match for the audience that we have, really. And thank you for coming on, Brianna.
Oh, I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
So in terms of starting point, I guess, do you want to start with kind of your background? I guess really your kind of bio summary will be a good place to go from.
Yeah, so I am a quantum healing practitioner. So I utilize multiple tools to bring in alignment with the mind, body, soul. Like you said, I'm a quantum healing hypnosis practitioner, but I'm also a Cosma master teacher, Metatronia, Metatrea, light fusion therapy, Reiki master. And so my ultimate mission is to teach people that there's a system that we're kind of missing. And that system is that, your nervous system is your body, your mind is the subconscious, and the soul is your energetic frequency. Those three systems work together, and a lot of people aren't taught how they work together. And so when we try to heal and go through it, this is why a lot of people will, I did the work, but they get stuck because those systems are playing and bleeding into each other. And so you've got one system part healed, but there's multiple to work through. So that's what I'm here and the mission I'm here to teach people about.
Perfect. It's so good when well, for me anyway, really, when I talk to practitioners like yourself, I have all of these different modalities because each modality opens you energetically to different things. And obviously you cover different things too. So having kind of multiple modalities, you can then kind of cohesively bring that together in terms of your personal healing, I guess. So going from your kind of profile, Brianna, would you like to take us back to your kind of NDE, which I guess is your starting point, really? And that was in 2020, was it?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was a starting point. It was more like the I can't deny the journey anymore. But in 2020, I had contracted fungal pneumonia in the height of COVID. And in the United States, I don't know how it was obviously in the other parts of the world, but they were testing for COVID, everything was COVID. So they didn't do the proper steps to find out that I had fungal pneumonia. They thought, or they tested me for COVID, sent me home, and this happened 3 times in a week. And the third time I collapsed in my home. I'll try to keep it long story short, but I died for 6 minutes. I remember stepping out of my body, looking at my body, and being completely detached from that physical vessel. And that was very profound to me and plays a lot in my ability to detach from, say, outcomes, people, things, all that stuff in my life now. Because and a lot of people that, we think when we cross over, we're leaving everyone, right? Or there's this, because in our human mind, we think of people going away, right? Well, we're not going away. We are all here on an energetic, vibrational frequency. We're just, not in this physical avatar. And so I was ready to, you know, kind of go back, but they told me in my soul contract, I had given myself an exit clause. Um, from the 3D world because I knew I was taking on an incredibly trauma filled, back filled karma life and that I was going to want to checkpoint out. And that was it. So that happened. And then I was given a DNA activation. So one of the other things I do, so I see psychic surgeon on there. I'm also a spiritual or astral surgeon. So DNA activations and light body activations. But I actually had a DNA activation happen in that near-death experience. They had all the sacred geometry and light frequencies passing through my essence and I knew like it's hard to use human words for this because you have this knowing and the words in earthly words just don't have the same impact, but I knew what was happening to me but I didn't know like in the earth sense. So when I came back, I didn't understand it. I had to go find out what had happened, but I knew in that moment what happened. And so I had that, and then basically I was shown this field of everything that had happened to me. Every moment, every thought, every heartbreak, everything that had ever happened throughout my life, and how it was all interconnected, that everything was intricately webbed and designed for me to end up in that hospital bed at that moment. Um, and I understood then there was no separation from what had happened through me to the person I was. It all had to happen. I knew that deep inside of me. And then I was shown the collective field. So you, me, everybody, and how all of that is connected the same way. There is no separation. We are all one, and we are having individual experiences, but it all comes back to the creation, and that's what we're here to do. We're raising the collective. So obviously, everyone in the NDE also remembers that unconditional love, and that's when I knew at our essence, at the core of who we are unconditional love, and we're here in the 3D to experience that polarity, sadness, greed, anger, rage, all the things that we call bad, which there is no real bad in the universe, but so that we can have true understanding of what unconditional love is. Because if all that is unconditional love and you didn't know anything else, how could you know the profound uh impact it is? You have to kind of have that polarity and that duality to truly appreciate and to, self-realize what we are as divine beings. So that was my shortened version.
So it was kind of almost like an awakening, I guess, was it really? So in terms of fungal mania, is that from sort of mold and things, or how did you actually, how did that kind of work for you? How did you catch that?
From wearing masks during COVID.
Oh, right.
So I got bacteria and mold in my mask, and I was putting it on, breathing it in, and that's how I got it.
Right, okay. Because I think that was one of the whole things, wasn't it, about COVID, that very early on we started to sort of notice that if you wear a mask all day, you're obviously preventing yourself breathing in clean air, and you're
Hmm.
then breathing in the kind of, what the carbon dioxide that's coming out of our mouth, we're taking that back in again. And, I did
Yeah.
kind of struggle with the whole concepts of what was going on personally, really. So I
Yeah, and
didn't,
at that time I had a farm, and so I had like a direct to consumer meat farm. So I did like Berkshire pork, chicken, free range chicken, very healthy versions. But I worked outside at farmers markets, and we were essential. And so I was, I live here in Minnesota, so in the middle of December, which is when this happened, um, it's 10 degrees outside, so you're also nose is dripping, that cold frigid air, and then you're breathing that heavy condensed air in. So yeah, it just became this like vapor lock,
yeah.
and that's how I ended up contracting it. Yeah.
And like, so was the resolution for that for you, was that antibiotics or something that they actually resolved that with in the end?
No, so I kind of had like a miraculous healing. I mean, so in the 6 minutes that I was gone, obviously I don't remember a lot even after. The first memory I have is when, or of coming back. Um, I could tell that things had subsided, and it was COVID, so I couldn't have family or anyone in the room. So there was just one nurse standing over me, and he was taking my blood pressure, and this is when I like came to. And my blood pressure was so low, the machine was like sending an alert. And I remember regretting coming back, the decision I had made to come back immediately, and was trying to convince the guy that it was normal that my heart pressure was crashing. Like, no, 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 just leave it. It's supposed to do that. Like, so after that, yeah, I had like a what do you call it? The ventilator, like it would breathe in, antibiotics into the lungs. I was released 2 days later. The doctor did tell me that I was going to have a lot of time in recovery because there was a lot of damage done to the lung. I went back into like the normal care provider a day or two later to, have everything looked at, and it was gone, like miraculously healed. And even the doctors are like, I cannot believe this. There's just no, remnants of it left. And so this is where I really got into the subconscious, and that's why I really started diving into that, how we can unlock the ability to heal the body. just because we decide to and truly decide to. So with quantum healing hypnosis, that's what we're doing with the subconscious. We are telling the subconscious that it's time to heal something in the physical body. And this is why people have such amazing results doing quantum healing hypnosis. You could tell the body to heal. And so it's just a matter of learning how to work with the subconscious mind, reprogramming it. And what I find a lot of my clients or even people I just meet, I mean, I meet a lot of people that have so many questions every single day. Um, but the subconscious, when you start to learn how to program it in a positive manner, I like to do subliminals at night. I do 21-day cycles. I think that's just the easiest just to start out. And I've been doing that now for, 6 years. But you can change the response because often people are like, "Oh, I just have to think positive." That's what it is, right? But you're consciously trying to think positive, so it's not authentic. You need it to come from a place of authenticity and it has to flow. So for me, if something bad happens now, I used to be very, nervous Nelly or negative about things, it would first be like my first thought would be like, oh, this is going to go wrong or that's going to go wrong. My brain doesn't think like that at all anymore. It's immediately, how can I look at the silver lining? Before we got on and started talking, we were talking about Mercury retrograde and how everything is all chaotic right now. And that's exactly what we were talking about is that, it's better to look at a system that needs to be looked at as opposed to it isn't working and it's all going to collapse and things like that. So that's how the brain, the mind part is functioning. So the subconscious is amazing when it comes to healing if you know how to work with it.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, Brheanna. So again, we're trying to get to the higher self, aren't we? Effectively, I know with hypnosis, obviously, what we're trying to do is sidestep the conscious mind effectively and get back to the higher self, which is kind of the subconscious aspect, and that's the part that you can really start to find has the answers, I guess. Is that the way that you kind of understand it too?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's all knowing. I mean, so I'm sure a lot of your listeners know what the Akashic records are, but to give kind of a quick for people that don't know, it's a place in the ether that holds all the information, blueprints, everything from every lifetime for every person, every thought, everything. And you can meditate or trance in and check in there. Of course, you have to be doing it from a place of love. It took me about 27 tries when I tried to read Akashic records. But that was because I was coming from a place of curiosity and I'm a truth seeker. I want to know, right? I'm like, I got to see this. And it didn't work until I came from helping someone, truly wanting to help them. And then I was entered into it. But that's a different, it's almost like going into the hypnosis and the higher self and the subconscious is a fast track, right? So there's multiple ways that we can channel this information and access it. And some of us have different styles of gifts. So that's why I think we have given ourselves these different ways of collecting information. So yeah, your higher self is all knowing. It knows everything that's ever happened to you. Your subconscious holds all that information of everything that you've ever experienced. And I kind of teach people about like conscious bypass, your consciousness is filtering all the time information. You're throwing out things just to make sense of your physical world. A good example of this is have you ever learned a new word and then you hear the definition, you hear it 10 times that week, and you're like, I heard it for the first time and now it's everywhere because your mind is just making sense and is bypassing things all the time. But your subconscious isn't. So imagine everything that your brain, your conscious mind is bypassing, and then that subconscious is holding all that. So there is a million things that we can access that you don't even realize. That's why, core beliefs are so important. I know I've heard you talk about that on here when I was listening to one, but yeah. So yeah, it's probably the most profound way to heal if in my opinion, to start for someone anyway.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It's a bit like the car concept, isn't it? When you're looking or thinking about a new car, you're going to change car for a particular model, a different car, Land Rover, Range Rover, and then suddenly you start to see them every day, all the time, but you've never noticed them before. But because you're
Yeah.
locking into that frequency, you're connecting to that frequency now, and then you start to see that car. And I think that for me, it was a while back, I started to realize that happens with everything, as you've said. If you want a new relationship, new wife, husband, new partner in your life, you have to lock into that frequency. And you're not, it's not that you're manifesting, it's that you're moving, you're changing your frequency to
Yeah.
connect to someone in that frequency. So, when I met Jane, my wife now, we've been married for a long time, like 20, 23, 22 years, something
Oh,
around there.
awesome.
So quite a long
Congrats.
time. But when we first met, I remember talking to her and said, I went through a checklist of all the things I wanted. Because I'd been divorced, had kids and stuff before, and said, right, I don't want any more children, but I'm looking for this, this, and this. And as we were talking, I was kind of checking this mental checklist off. And when I got to the end, I thought, oh, this is really good. It's like you're the perfect match for me, effectively. And of course, what I didn't realize was she was doing the same thing. She was working through what she did want against what she didn't want from her previous relationship. So effectively, as you start to kind of find these frequencies, like you say, your subconscious is locking you in to a
Yeah.
different place, and then you get a very different experience, which is kind of awesome, really.
Yeah, and if you're looking for, the shoe to drop, it's going to keep dropping. I always tell people, I'm like, if you're projecting that something's going to go wrong, it's going to. Or if you think something is going to go right, it's going to. It's how you project out, or if you're looking for opportunities, or if you're looking for things that are going to disappoint you, it's going to. I used to be a person that like I never get opportunities. I never see anything. I'm like, how are you guys seeing all these opportunities in your life? I could not wrap my head around it. Now I can't get up and out of my house without some opportunity landing in my lap of something. And it's everywhere now. And so like you said, the frequency, when you raise that vibration and you start to look for what, matches and aligns with you, or not even look, it's almost like you stop looking. That's the one thing I'm like, I just kind of stopped doing something and then, oh, there it is, you know? Because that's detachment of the outcome. But yeah, I think that's really great how you said that vibrational frequency is like every, thing you were looking for was a frequency. And when those lock together, boom, there it is, and so that's great.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the way you talk about your life, and obviously, from a hypnosis perspective, you're working with the higher self, subconscious, trying to sidestep the conscious mind. I think that's what I kind of have I've learned to do myself. Noticed, well, quite a while back now, really, that the conscious mind is the problem for most people because the
Mhm.
conscious mind is connected to the ego. The ego is trying to protect itself. Everything
Yeah.
that we do, basically, we have to be able to sidestep the ego. So if you can't kind of laugh at yourself in front of other people, it's because the ego is there protecting itself and doesn't want you to look silly or be silly. And I think when you become more authentically yourself, you stop worrying about everybody else and you just think,
Mhm.
who am I? What am I here to do? What am I here to provide, really? And what kind of life do I want to live? I think when we can start to answer some of those questions, we then sidestep this conscious part of us and we start connecting to that authentic bit behind, which is effectively the subconscious higher self. And then the doors start to really open. Is that how you work with quantum hypnosis? Is that the same type of concept?
Yeah, I love how you said that. That was beautifully said. Yeah, I mean, we're sidestepping so the conscious is connected to the nervous system or the ego. The ego is connected to the nervous system. So when you start to realize that your brain is scanning for things to be like your conscious mind is scanning for things that are going to let them down or hurt or make them look silly, like you said. And your nervous system is the part of the ego that wants to feel safe, right? So this doesn't feel safe. So even when you manifest something or you vibrationally align to something that you want, and all of a sudden your nervous system and your conscious brain starts going, I can't do this. This is not what your nervous system immediately goes, I'm not safe, and it will start pushing the vibration away from you. And this is why often, like, for an example, like if you get a job and you're a promotion that you really wanted, and then you kind of panic or you start to immediately worry about losing it, that's your nervous system saying we're not safe, because your nervous system and your ego doesn't really know the difference between like unsafe because of social environment or you're being attacked by a bear, right? Those are human labels. So your body in your physical vessel is going to respond the same way. So yeah, with quantum healing hypnosis, we're tapping into the subconscious, but that's all connected to the physical. And a lot of people don't realize how much our emotions attach to our physical body. We are the perfect human or healing machines. Humans used to live, if you go into like Anunnaki and the Sumerian tablets and things like that, like far longer than we do now. There's a lot of evidence of humans being 400 or 500 years old. Now, why is that changed? Because we have been, well, obviously there's a lot of things that have changed, but I won't put my tinfoil hat on, but
I think I've
um,
got mine on, so you're fine.
okay. Well, I mean, a whole system of shadow governments and the elites that created a system to keep us sick. I mean, you got agriculture. So I was a farmer, so I watched how agriculture was being changed and the GMOs and the pesticides and the things they were putting in our food. And, I've had a lot of people that are like, well, why would they poison our food? I'm like, because if you're sick, you're going to the doctor. At the ultimate day, they want you in that doctor's office taking those pills. It limits your power. And I say this to a lot of people. I'm like, think about it this way. If you weren't extremely powerful, you wouldn't waste your time poisoning a species to create a division and keeping them in a lower state or a lower class. That tells you all you need to know about how powerful we are because we have the shadow government. They're afraid of us, of us awakening, and that's why I always say I'm like they're grasping right now to create systems like the 5G towers. That's all frequency. That is messing with people all the time. I can hear it. It drives me nuts. Like lead paint in your walls. Remember, I don't know. In UK, do you have lead paint? Did they
We don't,
take that away?
well, we don't now, but we did have it back in the sort of 80s, probably.
Okay, so like yeah, it's illegal here now.
Yeah.
But
Of
here's
course,
the
that
thing is it,
reflected 5G, didn't it? So it was insulating.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
X-rays, microwaves, all this stuff. And we all know that they're not exactly care about our health because they're putting, carcinogenics in our food sources. But they're very, very aware of our paint. And I'm like, that's because that protected you, just like a lead vest when you go get an x-ray, it protects your
Mm.
organs. This is a war and, people need to be educated on how to, to combat it. Like I love this thing. So this is a frequency generator and I can program it. It's up to 10,000. And this one just kind of sits here, but it's an EMF and it just radiates into my space. So when I come in my room,
Yeah, same
yeah, like,
thing.
yep, yep. I immediately feel like a sense of peace within a space that I have several of these, but I could tell the difference if I'm out somewhere else because you can feel that frequency kind of hitting up against you, especially if you're really sensitive to that frequency. Yeah, so I'm
Yeah.
glad you have those too.
Yeah, well, the thing is, we're both obviously on the same page. So, again, I'm obviously work with my spirit guide Chen, so he just comes through. We do a lot of Q&As and talks and things, and quite
Mhm.
often he's talking about, the history of humans, how we were kind of manufactured or manipulated to be this kind of worker species, really, for the Anunnaki, and we're on
Yep.
that kind of journey, which actually on podcasts I don't generally cover because most of the people I have on podcast aren't in that same space. So when you said that, Brianna, I thought this is really funny that you're quite aligned with what I would be talking about, really. So,
Yeah,
so
the Anunnaki. I mean, so I'm a remote viewer, so I've remote viewed the Anunnaki timeline quite a bit, and it's impossible to deny. I think it's funny that, the powers that were are still trying to, but I mean, the veil is thin now, so even the Adum, the first man, was made of salt and clay. It was the genetic alternation of the Anunnaki. I mean, it was like it was all there, but they just, manipulated it from the dawn of time. And why? Because we're powerful, and that's what they are afraid of us all coming back to it.
So,
So,
so, so part of the work that obviously I do working with Chen is we obviously clear people energetically, and a
mhm.
lot of that is entity based. So finding entities in people's fields that are controlling them, intrusive thoughts, schizophrenia, self-harm, suicidal intention,
Yeah.
ideation. So does that come up in hypnosis? Do you find when you're trying to get to the higher self that you have entities, negative entities in there blocking that connection, or does that not really come forward for you?
I've had it come through a couple times where I'll connect to the higher self or the subconscious and they will make it aware to me that they have it. So I always say spirits and you work with Chen, I like that name. Um, they're opportunists. So when I'm in hypnosis with a client, often the higher self, but also different entities will come through and be like, hey, she needs to work on this. Or, so they'll give me the information or they'll be like, Brianna, you do spiritual surgery. She needs to have this device removed from her field. So they'll actually talk directly to me, even if I don't ask, but they know this is the opportunity. They're like, hey, they're sitting with someone that can help her with this. She's got to get this removed, that kind of thing. So it happens from time to time where they'll shift from like the questions I'm asking to directly talking to me about how I can further help this person. So yeah, that kind of comes through with entities anyway. But I've had ones where they said that they have a negative entity that keeps attaching. Archons like is the one that I get that kind of come through a lot, that people are getting Archon attachments. Um, and I teach people how to see Archons with soft gazing, and so I'll teach them, a couple little tricks on how to know they're in your field. Because people can see these things. You just have to learn how to remember. I mean, this is, I tell people like soft gazing, okay? For people that don't know, when you were a kid, you used to blur out your eyes and look at something, and you thought you were just being goofy, especially when you were in class. And I always say that was the indoctrinatable kids. We were not paying attention because what they were teaching you was hard focus. They were training your eye to narrow in, because one of the deficiencies, you will, with our eyes is that we were born to see energy. That's why kids see auras. That's because it was eventually trained out of your eye. But you can relearn it. I always tell people, go look at a wall, start blurring your eyes again. Don't focus on anything specific. You'll start seeing energy pockets moving. Everyone can do this. I've taught hundreds of people how to do this. And yeah, they use that hard focus to keep us from seeing what is around us and what is, and Archons is a big one. I could see Archons coming, and they're scavengers, right? They'll go away if you tell them to. But you have to be aware they're there. They're little parasites.
Yeah.
So,
And of course, they normally connect to trauma, don't they? I don't know,
mhm.
in my work, certainly when we talk to clients, or I look at the client report and see all of the trauma they've been through, I think there will be attachments and entities that are connecting to that trauma. So if we can float that trauma and surface it basically in our work, then we can find the entities that are connecting to it, driving the behavior, then clear them, and then of course everything brings brings you back to a place of clarity and
Mhm.
kind of free will sovereignty, really, to a certain
Yeah.
perspective. Is that what you're doing, really, in the same way?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I do entity removals and things like that. It's not my main focus, but yes, that's how I see it as well. And with Archons, like you said, attachment to trauma, that's very huge. And I always tell people like a great way to kind of to identify that is intrusive thoughts.
Yeah.
When they start to kind of suck off your energy field or attach, you'll start having these really weird negative, into the void is what I kind of call them, thoughts. And that's usually a good sign that an archon is latching to you or has. So, just things that people can do in their daily. If you're having a lot of intrusive thoughts, you don't know where they're coming from, I would say look into energetic parasites or, yeah. So I work
Yeah.
with them a little bit, but my surgery aspect more, I mean, I do clearing of fields, but more of the subtle fields. So if I see something within that field when I'm in there, I'll remove it. Um, but yeah, it's not my main thing.
What would so like in terms of the way that you work, Brianna? What would your kind of like a kind of typical day be from a client perspective, really? So a client would book you for some type of service, and obviously you would then how do you connect? Do you connect to them live, or is it a remote session that you don't need to actually see them? How do you work?
Yeah, I have both. So I have two kind of pathways that I send people down. And it really depends on and everybody's story and their purpose and what they've been through and experienced, and where they're ultimately trying to get to are always going to be different. So I have one that's my transformation pathway, and that is where I work more with the healing aspect. So healing trauma, healing it in the field, so that's more of my Cosma, my vortex training, Metatronia, more just getting someone stabilized. And then I have an activation sequence, and that's where the pathway where people that are kind of went through this already and are ready to take the next step, or have done a lot of their own healing work. You don't have to go through my pathway first. I'm just saying, like, when you're ready. So, like, I remove J seals or Jehovian seals. These are energetic implants that are on the left side of your body. It opens up a gate, kind of connects you higher to your higher self more. Then the DNA activations, light body sequence. And yeah, I have a studio. So I have an in home studio. So I do meet with people daily, but I also do a lot of remote sessions. And some sessions I choose to do only remote, like so Metatreya is the divine feminine of Archangel Metatron. So I like doing Metatron in person, or I'm okay with doing that one in person. But Metatreya is a beast when it comes to healing. For example, when I had my first session done before I became a practitioner, um, that energy is she's healing feminine wounds, divine feminine energy, ancestral karma, things that are attached to the feminine polarity. And I was child trafficked young, so I had a lot of wounds that came through, and I was basically put in this little energetic hug for about 4 hours. And so I don't like doing that one in my office because I don't know how much healing people are going to really need from her because we have a lot of those wounds here. But yeah, so that one I almost always do remote. So, but I love that energy. I always say, I'm like, that is a goddess queen. You could just feel it as she passes through you.
Yeah, so I think that's the way you've described it. It's a wonderful way to explain it. Actually, that it's kind of like a goddess hug because, there are deities on the planet. Obviously, there's Amma as well, like an Indian one
Yep.
that does the same sort of thing. You queue up for hours on end, I think, really, and then you get
Yeah.
like a 10-second hug, and that kind of fixes the world for you. And then obviously, next person comes in behind. So there are these people that are walking around that are here to cement that energy, bring it forward, and obviously
Yeah.
vibrate with that frequency. And like you say, obviously in your past, there's a lot of things that have happened and gone through, and all of them probably have aligned you to be who you are. And I guess it
Yeah.
for all of us, I don't really know any spiritual practitioners that do the sorts of things that we all do that haven't been through their own trauma, pain, problems. It's part of the path, really. It's
It's
kind of
part of the
part of
path.
the path. And I think it's one of those things you look back and think, in the darkest of days is when you learn the most. Certainly
Yeah.
for me, the times that I was more or less suicidal, really, with the things I
Hmm.
was experiencing, that was when I learned the most. And I think what amazing training ground that was, really, to actually have the opportunity to go through those things, and then you pop out the other end and think, actually, I'm going to line up now and basically work against this negative vibration
Hmm.
that's here on the planet for the rest of my life, and in the same way that you are, really. And I think
Yeah.
that's what the more I talk to people like myself, yourself, the more I kind of see the same things. Is that there's trauma in the background, really, but what comes forward is this warrior spirit that stands up, grabs the kind of shield and the and sword, and says, "Right, let's go."
It's
Which is
funny you say that. I actually have warrior tattooed right here, so
right.
it's kind
Yeah,
of funny.
right. And then I'm obviously connecting to your energetic blueprint, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
fantastic.
no, I agree with you. I think I kind of look at it like we front load a lot of karma and trauma to the beginning of our journey, so that we can kind of work through it to come back. I mean, it's I always kind of say it's like the spiritual pressure cooker. We are just being pushed and pushed and pushed, and then when you come out the other side and you have that what we would call like an awakening, and it all kind of starts to, it the first part of the awakening, I always think it's funny where people are like, "Oh, it's so love and light." No, it's really, really horrible when it first comes. Because when I came back from my near-death experience, my whole life fell apart. I had this spiritual euphoria. I was like, "Okay, I'm getting on my spiritual path, and I'm gonna like." I thought it was all gonna just be sunshine and rainbows, and it was like, nope, just everything fell apart. I sold my farm, got divorced. Like I'm like, well, that wasn't what I was expecting at all. But then I obviously learned that you have to empty the cup. You have to empty the field in order for the things that you're truly manifesting in to come in. So, a lot of people think loss is bad. It's not. It's just clearing. I think a lot of people have heard that like haiku. It's like if you have a coffee cup and you pour coffee into it, if it's full, you can't pour any more into that cup, right? You got to throw it out and start over. And that's a lot of what the spiritual first awakening, right after the dark night of the soul, and you start kind of coming into it. And yeah, I think it's a big building ground. But one thing I would say, like when you were thinking back about like when you were suicidal and things like that, another thing that kind of resonated with me in that is I have so much um admiration for that version of me now. When I was in that moment, I was very self-loathing. And I like now look back and like, God, look what you were handling. And you handled it, you know? And so I think that's a great thing for people to kind of do as an exercise as well. Is like look back at that person and from the lens of if that was someone else and they were carrying all of that, what you carried, would you just sit there in awe of that person? Because I do it all the time. I'm like, you know, and I even grieve that person, you know, or grieve that person's gone because, you know, she was such, you know, she got me here, you know. And that's part of the growth of the awakening too, is, you know, the releasing that attachment, but also having admiration to that version.
And I think, yeah, the way you've explained that is really, I think it's quite marvelous actually, because again, so many people reach out to us and say exactly what you said. I've just come on my spiritual path, which means my life has fallen apart, basically. It's not all sunny, it is the opposite generally. As you said, you know, life's falling apart, financial problems, probably relationship problems, probably divorce, problems with children, problems with family. So generally, I think most people, again, in my kind of experience, need to go right, but they come down the snake right to the bottom. So you've been climbing this ladder all of your life and trying to get to the next material step, really, whether that's
Yep.
job or promotion or money or whatever. And then suddenly everything kind of goes wrong, and you find yourself at the bottom of the snake, and you think, "Wow, I've got nothing again." But as you just said, is a great place to start because now you can build yourself with your own idea of you, your own frequency, your own choices, your own thoughts. Whereas when you've been on that kind of ladder, you've been built into someone else has sculptured you really, and you have to now get
Yeah.
back to the bottom, take your chisel and your hammer and start to sculpture who you actually want to be. And generally that's a very different person. And I think that is what I kind of find so interesting about the spiritual path is that when you meet people whose lives have just fallen apart, as you just said, you're almost in awe of them. See, because I always think, but you're going to be amazing in 10 years. You're at the start now, and in 10 years' time, you're going to be a perfect version of you that you would never have thought. It's just that today, your life's shit, basically, and that's kind
Yeah.
of where it is.
But you know, I do a lot of mentorship. So, you know, I do like spiritual mentorships or like life transformation. And when you do a transformation or a mentorship program with me, my first thing is I started out and I'm like, we're just going to rip a band-aid off. Okay. Two things. One, probably everything you've ever been told or believe is a lie. Okay. And then second is everything that's happening to you is your fault. Not because you deserved it, but because you chose it. And now when you just take that out, there's only accountability in that too. So I think what you said was, you know, really great for that because when you're at that low, if you just accept that you chose to be in that low, the everything fall apart, everything goes to shit, that was your decision because you wanted that experience. Why? And you know, not that you're not worthy, deserving, whatever, but why did you choose that path? Why did you decide that's what you wanted to lose or to, you know, experience? So it's a lot of great information there for people, you know, there's to gaze into their like soul purpose and contract. So when everything's falling apart, that's when you find what you truly are made of at a soul level, you know, not who you were told to be. Who are you at the core? Because it usually, like you said earlier, that in your darkest days that you learn the most.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to frame it, actually. And I guess I think, you know, when I look at people like myself, yourself, lots of other people, everyone's the same. Everyone has the same story, whereby things were great, it was all going so well, it all fell apart, basically. You have to
Hmm.
start again. And then you find that as you rebuild and you re kind of sculpture this version of you, other people are attracted to you because they're watching what you're doing, thinking, how are you doing that? And I'm in the same space. And you kind of find that you end up becoming a mentor for other people, not by choice, but because you've had to build yourself from scratch. Other people want to know the kind of building blocks for them. And that's what I was going to ask you, Brheanna, about your mentorship program. So when you start off with people, they're having their darkest days, I guess. So what's the timeline for you to kind of rebuild them? And as you said so well, everything you've been taught is a lie. So when we look at kind of our social system, cultural system, political system, finance system, we realize that the whole thing is built upon a massive lie, really. But most people don't get that to start with, and it does take a bit of time to go through the process of peeling these layers back and thinking, why
Yeah.
would someone say those things? And if those people are saying those things, why have they got to that understanding? So it's almost like the flat Earth conversation coming up early. So how
Yeah.
do you transition someone from the Earth is round to it's flat along that kind of spiritual mentorship platform?
Well, I like to kind of see where people already have made I'll ask people about their religious beliefs. So that's a big one because there's pillars of control that kind of were set up that there's a lot of them, but there's major ones, right? Our healthcare, religion, education. So I usually hit their belief systems in those places to kind of gauge where they have put a core belief from like a societal standpoint. What you said earlier about the ladder, the checklist. I talk about that. We talk about life as a grocery list, right? Get married, have kids, buy a house, get a job, do the and it's like if you're not doing this, then you're not achieving, right? And that comes from a wound of worthiness, which of course Chiron is actually transiting into Taurus. So um all of you are going to really be feeling that wound of worthiness. And it doesn't just mean self-esteem. A big one of that is feeling like you have to perform to be loved. And that checklist that we've created is exactly that wound. It's that I have to meet this. I got to meet someone. And then all of a sudden you're at the top of that ladder and you don't know who you are anymore. You're sitting there going, I don't even know why am I doing this, and that's where it all kind of crumbles. So yeah, I love how you said that. I say that all the time, the grocery list. But yeah, I usually gauge where people are, and I have different programs. So I have a 3, 6, 9, and a year long. But I'm kind of selective who I take on in mentorships because I won't do one-offs anymore. I used to do like, oh, we'll just meet up, for a couple of sessions. But the truth is, people that come to me are looking for total transformation, and I want to see that in them too because what I do with them, it's not easy. I'm not gonna, I'm very kind. I always move from a place of unconditional love, but I'm not going to tell you what you think everyone else was going to tell you along the way because that's how you got there in the first place, right? A belief system, a pattern. So, uh, I like to see people that really want to go the distance. And I've had so many people that have done complete 180s in their life, and it's beautiful to watch. For me, even to, see someone go from the caterpillar to this butterfly, and that's just amazing. Especially people that are like so much trauma. I work a lot with sexual assault victims or survivors. And we have this kind of concept that becomes our identity, right? And that's where people really hold on to, and not just sexual assault, any trauma, really. We created it as a part of our identity. And the one thing I notice a lot with my mentorship program is um, their belief is, well, when you break it down, is that they don't know who they are without that trauma. So they will keep cycling back to that feeling, that pain, and reliving it because letting it go is almost more terrifying, even though you want to heal, but putting that down, it's like that's scary. What comes, who is that person up there, right? And that's, I think, a big part that people in my mentorship program really excel in is that I get them past that fear of letting go of that trauma, and I also tell people, I'm like, my goal is to lose you as a client because at the end of the day, we are self-healing. My ultimate goal is that you understand that you are a healing being and that everything is within you. The kingdom lies within you, and I lose you. And and I have probably 10, 15 really close friends now that went through my program that they don't need me at all anymore when it comes, obviously support and like we have conversations and stuff, but they know now how to heal themselves. They don't need me to do it for them. They don't come to me to do, every once in a while, like an energy session, just kind of, clean things up. But, it's all within you. And that's ultimately the goal, right? That's what my mission is, to teach the world that we are so powerful, as I kind of said in the beginning.
It is right. So, do you use like past life regression as part of your sort of tool set, really, or does that not come into what you do?
Yeah, well, quantum healing hypnosis is past life regression
Oh,
and subconscious higher self connection. So we go through 3 lives roughly. I've had ones that we could only go through one because it was such a profound life and they had so many blocks from it. But I always say I try to get about 3 in. And yeah, that's a huge benefit. Actually, it's how I started. Even before I had my near-death experience, I was already dabbling in this. I knew it was coming. I was having probably back in 2017 was when my first awakening happened, but it was more like tiptoeing, right? But when I look at my whole life as a whole, I realize I was doing this from the beginning, from the day I was born. So I had an imaginary friend. Her name was Apple Pie. This is a fun story. Um, when I was growing up, my first major trauma hit about when I was 10 years old. But apple pie and I never talked to people. Everyone kind of thought there was something wrong with me because I was very quiet as a child, but I was watching everything. Like my favorite activity was watching trees like blow in the wind or ant hills. Those are my favorite things to do as a kid. Because I found it fascinating, but I remember now it's like being in awe of the earth plane. Later I find out from my Akashic records I'm what they call a blueprint designer soul. So I don't know if you know what that is, but
Oh,
my soul was part of the creation of designing the earth plane when the school is being built. So it makes perfect sense that I was in awe of like the trees and ants and the everything as it moved. And but anyway, so apple pie was really my only friend. And then she left after my first major trauma. And after I had my near death experience, I had a Kundalini awakening spontaneously. I don't recommend people mess with that unless they're ready. That's so I just want to caveat that. You have
yeah,
to really be ready. It's quite something if you don't know what you're doing. I didn't know, it just happened, and so I had to but so that happened, and then I had started really working with my guides to the point where I can like have conversations and meditate and visually see them. Um, but I had three that always come through very heavily. But I remember there being like an energy towards the back of the space, but it never came forward over multiple sessions. And then finally, about a year after that, she stepped forward, and it was apple pie. And she had told me in that meeting that she couldn't come forward before because she needed me to believe, because I'm a very logic brain. I have to understand um, that I would have believed that it was a childhood delusion if she had come forward sooner. And I would have basically collapsed everything I was doing, be like, okay, that's what it is. I'm having child trauma. It's coming up. And I would have justified it in my human 3D society trained brain, right? Because that's what we're told. Oh, you're crazy. You got schizophrenia. Oh, you had a mental collapse. Oh, this is psychosis. All the things that we label. Um, and so that's kind of how it came through for me. And so yeah, I realized that I was on this journey. I learned how to read runes when I was, I think nine was when I started reading runes. And so divination, but my mom had, a very hard trauma life of her own, and she had substance issues and problems. Um, so I actually turned my back on any divination, crystals, all that because I associate it to a negativity. And but I'm a natural reader, and it just, so that was my wound. It pulled me away from any spiritual practices. And I actually had a dark energy towards it. And I had to come back to that and realize that that was all part of the way to get me here. So I always tell people like, you're on this path a lot longer than you realize if you go back and really start looking at all the little check marks along the way, because it's all connected.
yeah. And I think that's the great thing about past life regression, really. That again, you can take someone back to a point in time that has a very direct impact on their life today. We talk
Hmm.
about we obviously run training courses with psychic protection, that kind of stuff. We always talk about fears. People, it's certainly in the UK, everyone's frightened of spiders, and yet we don't have big spiders, and our spiders don't kill you. So it's like, why would you be worried or fearful of a spider that hasn't actually caused you any particular problem? So this is obviously past life stuff that's feeding over into this life. And then when we start talking about this whole spider conversation, I had a chat with Chen one day and said, why is it everyone, certainly in the UK, seems to be so frightened of spiders? And he said, well, it comes from the Galactic Wars when we were fighting arachnoids, which are spiders. So, okay, he said, they're ferocious to fight. And people that have been in those wars in past lives obviously have this massive fear of spiders when they incarnate into this life. And I've found that quite fascinating and thought, well, that's really
That
interesting.
is fascinating. Because I have no fear of spiders. I always say it because I used to live in the desert. And so I live in Minnesota. We don't have any poisonous spiders here. We have bigger ones, but nothing that's going to kill you. And I lived where we had black widows and, that kill you. So for me, I'm like, everyone in my house is like, there's a spider. I have to go do it. But
Yeah.
I'll even capture it and put it outside because I don't like killing anything just because it's in my space. Um, but yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know about that, and that's cool to hear because I have like a zero fear of them, and it's
Yeah.
kind of
So
weird.
Yeah, and I think again when you start talking to people, again, if it's any other animal in the house or any other insect, most people are fine with it. But spiders seems to be this.
Yeah,
So obviously, from a consciousness or conscious awareness perspective, we're all connected. So we're all
yeah,
connected to this fear of spiders from this kind of time when obviously we've been at war with that species basically, and as we incarnate onto the earth, we then connect to that frequency again. So, because it is
yeah,
just kind of frequency. So
yep.
I do the same. If we've got spiders in the house, I just telepathically talk to them and say, look, you can't stay. You need to disappear. We'll give you 24 hours, and you need to be out, basically. And then the next day they're gone, and it kind of just works.
Okay. Yeah. That's really cool. Because I talk a lot about like the I always call it like a generational hypnosis but like snakes. Everyone's afraid of snakes and they're like, "Oh, it's from childhood." Well, here's the thing is when a child is young, because I have a pet snake, they're not afraid of it at all.
Yeah,
And so I'm like, it's a learned behavior. But why are we afraid of the snake? So I think that's interesting about the past life thing. And I guess I gotta tune into that and see if that's not something else that everyone's kind of sitting with the fear. I mean, obviously the snake was the villain in the Bible, so I think there's a
yeah.
level to that too.
Well, I
Um,
guess we have got the reptilian energies and entities that, we're part of them effectively with the R complex and that kind of stuff. So I guess we're very connecting to that species as well, but maybe
yeah.
I mean, there's obviously good reptilian entities as well as bad ones, of course, as with everything. But
Mhm.
again, in the spiritual arena, things get kind of magnified on the negative, and we don't really talk about the positive ones that are here to do good things as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I love my snake, and it's funny I because I didn't realize how terrified people are of snakes. I mean, people are like, I don't like snakes until you have one, and then they'll be like, oh, what's in there? And it's like, oh, it's a ball python. Oh, like immediately, it's like, so many people, but he
Is
doesn't
that
bite at all. So.
out loose in the house then, Brianna, or was that in a tank or something, or kind of?
Well, he has a tank, but he comes out. He's so gentle, and I actually use him a lot to kind of help people with their fear of snakes. Because I'm like I'm like I'll put him right by my face, and I'm like he won't bite you, and
Right.
then people will hold him, and that kind of helps with the getting past that fear. So, he's a service snake.
Because like you said that, I just had this picture of you like Game of Thrones, with the blonde hair and the kind of, well, the dragon I know in Game of Thrones, but the same type of thing that you're connecting with or part of, interestingly. So,
So that's funny you say that because I'm very connected to the dragon field. Whenever I do any kind of like deep trance breath work or anything, dragons are always what come. I did like a psilocybin, I don't know, retreat, and yeah, I had like all these dragons that just hung out. And so this was early in my awakening too. So it was like just all these like pink ones, and they were, they're not ferocious. I mean, some were like, but some of them were like furry, and so I'm very tied to dragon energy, and so whenever I do like a deep meditation, I almost always get a dragon eye first thing I see, and so I know that energy's with me. Fun story, I actually I've always been really. Do you know who Val Kilmer is, the actor?
no,
He was in like Top Gun and Tombstone and The Doors. He played
I'd probably recognize him if I saw him actually.
yeah, so it's funny, my whole life I've always been really into like the movies that he's done. So cowboys, I always loved cowboys, and then he was in the Top Gun movie, which was the fighter pilots. So
Yeah,
I got my pilot's license. So he's influenced me from afar for a long time. And so before I even realized about soul families and how interconnected we are, turns out he's in my soul family, and I didn't know until the night before he died, but I was always drawn to him. And then I had this dream that he was in a casino and I worked there or something. And I walk over to him, or he called me over. He's like, "Come here, darling." And so I come over and he's like, "I'm going to miss you. I'll see you next time." And right as he says that, this dragon comes out of the poker table, comes up, and he basically climbs on it and he leaves. Well, then I woke up the next morning and Val Kilmer died.
right.
So that dragon energy was connected between us, and he basically came to say goodbye. Now, and this is what I tell people, Mike, you don't have to be directly influenced by people to be in their soul contract, because he has multiple people that he was sending influence through, right? But for me, it resonated and put me on a lot of paths that I probably wouldn't have gone on had I not seen that film or seen him. He's a huge artist and the things he did, and it affected me. And then it turned out he was in my soul family. So I find that, like, and I say this a lot with people with their ripple, a lot, you get it probably too. I want to know what my purpose is. I want to know what my path is, right? And that's the ego mind thinking that we have to have some grand achievement that goes back to the checklist, right? That says this is our purpose. But it's dropping the ripple, and that ripple goes out, and you don't realize how far your actions ripple in through the collective. So I'm like, I've looked at a lot of Akashic records, and some of the most powerful life purposes that I've seen are people that have a seemingly quiet, boring life, we would consider because they're doing things that are just extremely selfless, kind, and that ripples. Maybe you do something kind, for a boy that remembers that act of kindness for the rest of his life, goes off and, creates a nonprofit that, you know, does this huge. So you think that you're not having the purpose because you're not seeing it with your ego 3D circumference, but we make some huge impacts that we don't even get to see. And that's kind of what the Val Kilmer thing was to me. He didn't know in his, physical form that he made an impact on me or that we were connected at a soul level. But then, that's how we're here doing our soul missions. So, you know, just keep being nice and kind and you're making huge waves in, the collective.
Yeah, that's a really good way to kind of finalize that conversation. The way that Chen explains it to me really is that we all have a frequency, we have a vibration, we all carry light, basically.
Hmm.
Everywhere we walk on the planet, we leave our footsteps in light, in frequency and vibration. And then if someone comes along behind you and puts their feet on the top of your footsteps, if they're having a bad day or they've got trauma, your vibration from your imbued footprint in the crystalline brings them up. So basically, all we need, because I said to Chen one day, what's the most important thing for people to understand? And he said, just stay alive. Every day you're alive, you take a breath, your frequency is here, your energy is here. If you can then start to laugh a bit and just bring your frequency up, that does more than anything else on the planet. And it's kind of such a simple thing to do, yet we never
Yeah.
kind of think, as you said, we think about these, we need to be someone or do something or create something. But just waking up and smiling and laughing probably has more impact than anything else, actually.
Yeah, I say this almost every day of my life, but I'm like, you are a human being, not a human doing. Just being is good enough. You don't have to be doing something to be achieving a goal. So yeah, I like how you said that with the frequency on top of each other. It's good. But yeah, yep. I mean, and that's the thing is, I always talk about the Vikings. They kind of got erased from history. That's another tinfoil hat. Obviously, I'm a huge. I have a lot of Viking lifetimes, so it was embedded in my soul. I had more Viking tattoos before I knew any of this, and then I find out all these lifetimes I had, and Freya is actually my main deity, and so it's so it's just funny how it comes, it radiates out. But the Vikings were grid workers. They were moving frequencies, but of course we created them to just be these barbarians and they had no culture and they just, and you have to wonder why, we have no written history. You're telling me they didn't write anything down, nothing other than other people's perceptions, but they were grid workers. They were spreading energy, like you said, that frequency field across different, parts of the world. And I think there's a lot of people that are really drawing to that Viking culture now because they're starting to remember being grid workers. And a lot of people now are traveling, they're moving around, they're being called to different places. I encourage people all the time, like if you're being called to a location, go. There's a reason. Um, so a lot of people are starting to move and get around, and that's I think helping a lot with the awakening, getting out there because we're moving that energy, moving that frequency. Um, and creating, different. I mean, imagine if we could see the field that we're creating. I bet it's a beautiful piece of sacred geometry.
Yeah. And also, we're like kind of chess pieces where the guides are just moving us into position continually, really. It's kind of how I see my kind of life.
Yep.
Obviously, talking to you, it's like you put yourself out there and then you see what comes back, and then people connect, you have a chat, and you think, wow, we're connected, we're on the same space, in the same place, doing the same things. And then people listen to the conversation. As you said, just someone gets inspired by something that you said, or someone stays alive from something they've heard. And you think, again, you don't know what's happening, but you know that there is this sacred geometry that's going to come into place from a grid perspective, really. And that kind of is light, effectively. And I think coming back to the start of what you said, the very start of this conversation, is what I think we're all here to be so powerful, trying to work against this negativity. And we kind of, it's not going to be a physical war, it is a kind of vibrational frequency war that's always been here. It's just that I think people like ourselves and know that we're in it. And it is a spiritual war, not a physical one, particularly. And obviously, therefore, the rules are different. And you have to learn what the rules of engagement are and how you're going to work in that kind of framework, really.
Yeah, the physical war is a distraction. I tell people, I'm like, if you don't think this is a spiritual war, you better get behind someone that does, because that's what they're coming after. I
Yeah.
mean, I can see it playing out, but yeah, I'm like, this physical wars that we have going on, those are a distraction. That's to keep people focusing on that. So you're not focusing on your internal world and, all of it, all the propaganda, all the, negativity, the diversity, all the things they're trying to create to keep us fighting amongst ourselves, whether it be, you know, sexuality, race, you know, all of it, Zionism, all the things are to keep us from coming back to self and that unconditional love. And, it's all a distraction. I'm like, turn off the news, turn it off.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best bit of advice you can give anyone these days is look within, not without, basically. I always
Mhm.
try and get people to think, who am I? Why are you here? What resonates with you? If
Yeah,
you listen to someone speaking, either you'll connect to what they're saying and you'll think that sounds good, or you won't. And if what they're saying isn't true, probably you'll disconnect. So it's a vibrational thing again that everything we say as words have frequency. People
hmm
that speak in truthful frequencies, you're going to connect with. Those that are being deceitful, you're going to disconnect from, basically. So
yeah.
it kind of is simple, or it should be simple, really. So
It's simple for you and I know that. I can, yeah, I try very hard to explain these concepts to just like, I mean, people that come to me as a client usually have an idea of what they're doing, but I'll try to throw it out to the muggles every once in a while. They're like, "What?" All right, I tried, but yeah,
yeah, that's probably
it,
our job, though. It's probably your job, Brianna, really, to try to connect to some of these people. But again, you can't kind of go in with the Earth is flat conversation, even if it is or whether it isn't, because that puts you in a certain bracket. You do
yeah,
have to try and connect with something they can connect with. And like you say, obviously, the way they feel and their emotional state and what they're thinking is kind of a starting point, I think, really. And then we can start to build the understanding and then like bring back the intelligence and the light effectively is what we is the way that Jane and I try and work now. We try and connect people on the kind of easy level without being too confrontational or conspiratorial. And
yeah.
then
I like to throw. I say I'm like planting seeds, and often they'll come back when it starts
yeah,
to, cultivate. And they're like, "I
yeah,
want to talk about that again." Okay.
spiritual gardening that is.
Yeah, exactly. Let me just throw a
Perfect.
few seeds your way. Tend them if you want or don't. And then usually they'll come back like, I got some questions. All right.
Brilliant. So as we're sort of wrapping this up, Brianna, so can you remind us how do people get to you? What
Yeah.
what is your kind of preferred method of dealing with people, talking to people, email, websites, Facebook, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, you can find everything. I have everything on one website now. So it's lightandbreezycoaching.com, and you can contact me. I have 3 books that you can order off of there. So that helps a lot with if you want, if I'm an independent learner, I like to do that. So a lot of these things, I've got all my podcasts, books, everything. And then you can always contact me through there. So yeah, it's lightandbreezycoaching.com.
That's easy. It's easy having one place to focus in on, really.
Yeah, I like
Yeah.
funnels.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is one of the big problems as well, isn't it? Where there's so many places now you can, or you need to be as a kind of person that is public. Everyone expects you to be on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, websites, podcasts, YouTube, and but having one place that everything converges into, at least that's where you kind of start. So
Yeah.
but what we'll do at the end of this, Brianna, I'll get you linked up. You obviously share the links and stuff with the YouTube and where we
Yeah.
drop these things on Facebook and that kind of stuff. I'll make sure you're linked in and we've got all your details for people to connect with you because I think obviously you've got a way with words and a way with yourself and obviously quite an
Thank you.
amazing story. So I think for people listening, certainly the listeners that we have that are very up with the conversation that we've had today, which isn't for everybody, of course is you're a great place to start. So we'll kind of encourage people to connect with you.
Well, thank you. And I really enjoyed our conversation today. So thank you for having me. And I hope to connect again soon.
Yeah, perfect. We'll do that, definitely. Okay, Brianna, will you take it easy? Enjoy the
All
rest of
right.
your day, and I'll catch you again.
All right. Sounds great. Many
Thanks.
blessings.
Bye.